We'll call this meeting of the JEA Board of Directors to order. My name is Alan Howard, and I am about to be the former chair. And with that, my last official act will be to pass the gavel to our new chair, April Green. Good luck.
Okay. We can get everyone to stand. Well, first of all, let's get, we've got Reverend Newbill, board member on the line. Let's get him on the line. Reverend Newbill, can you hear us? Reverend Newbill?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you could hear us. All right.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Everyone stand for a moment of reflection, followed by the pledge to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to have a little change in the agenda, and I would like for us to go around and introduce who's sitting at the dais for those streaming online. So starting from my left with Councilman Schellenberg.
Matt Schellenberg, City Councilman, representative for the City Council.
Alan Howard.
Camille Lee Johnson.
Lynn Rohde.
Lasikia Hodges, Office of General Counsel.
April Green.
Aaron Zahn.
Kelly Flanagan.
Thank you. Okay. If I could get a, the agenda has been published. If I could get a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
We had a first from Ms. Flanagan and a second from Board Member Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So moved. All right, next we'll have the safety briefing by Mr. Zahn.
Yeah, so safety is a core value, one of our cultural values. In fact, it's our top cultural value, as we've been reminded of in the recent weeks. In the event of emergency, may I have somebody that will call 911? John, thank you very much. And someone that is certified in CPR? Ms. Dykes, thank you so much. Please identify the person to your right. If there is no one to your right, look behind you. That is your safety buddy. In the event of emergency, we will proceed in an orderly manner down the stairwell. Hold the railing as you go down, please, and cross to Church in Main, and we'll convene there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll have Sunshine Law Public Record Statement by Lasikia Hodges, Office of General Counsel.
So this meeting is subject to the Florida Government and the Open Sunshine Law and shall be open to the public at all times.
Thank you. And we have, next on the agenda, we have comments from the public. We have one, Miss Judy Franklin. Come on up. Please state your name and address, please.
My name is Judy Franklin. I live at 14489 Magnolia Springs Lane East, Jacksonville, Florida, 32258. I'm very nervous, but I'm also very sad that I even have to be here today. Y'all are putting some extremely dangerous high voltage power lines less than 18 feet from Phillips Highway, which are in violation of your own safety regulations, and less than 200 feet from our homes, one of which I back up to. These radiations that come from these power lines are extremely dangerous, and y'all have tried to control the narrative. Your town hall on March 28th was a joke. You didn't let the public speak. You had these little job booth fair, circular firing squad, telling people to get their questions answered, and then you couldn't even answer their questions. And you kept sending them to another booth to get the question answered. People were sitting down waiting for a presentation and waiting to be heard. And you told them, there's going to be no presentation. There's going to be no question and answer session later. You need to go to these booths now. You were very successful at getting 75% of the people to leave that meeting. Several hundred showed up. And your spokespeople were outrageous. You tried to tell us, you tried to create the narrative, and you refused to hear our narrative. Our property values are going to be devalued by 10 to 30%. But your high-paid people, well-written scripts, convince people otherwise. Well, I've talked to local realtors in this community, and that's not true. Everybody knows it's a wink and a nod. They cause cancer, and there's been studies that children, far more dangerous to children, are exposed at an earlier rate. I had half my thyroid removed 3 years ago. The Mayo Clinic goes, were you exposed to high voltage power lines when you were a child? Because this is what we see in children and adults that were exposed at an early age to high radiation. Shame on all of you. And our elected officials, Mr. Danny Beckham, was more interested in serving your interest than his own constituents that voted him into office. We don't have the deep pockets. We're middle class. And you're going to sit here and tell us and shove this down our throat. And finally, a spokesman said, yes, it will not benefit Bartram Springs one bit. But he basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, you better suck it up because you're helping the communities to the south of you like Nocatee. Bartram Springs, you want to tie into our 3 substations, and it has zero benefit for us. Shame on all of you that I even have to be here today to speak on behalf of everyone. People are upset by this, and these power lines are dangerous. April 5th, Seattle, Washington had power lines topple and almost killed 2 people in a car. And the winds weren't even that high. April 19th, Jackson, Mississippi, tornadoes came and power lines fell down. These are 125-foot power lines in the air, and they're 18 feet from Phillips Highway. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, May 15th, power lines toppled, almost killing people. This morning, Dayton, Ohio had tornadoes come through and power lines topple and people out of power. And you want to put these, because we're going to be a Pinto Ford case, that you're going to value our life later as it happens? You're going to value the cost of when these health issues arise and our power. You're going to take us one by one because it's cheaper to settle with us later than deal with it now and move the power lines across the street where there isn't anyone because JEA bought this land cheaply years ago from the railroad? Because you don't want to consider. At the meeting they said, well, we would have to buy 40 or 50 properties if we moved across state, 40 or 50. Someone stood up and said, what about the 2,000 homeowners over here? Because you want to do this cheaply at the taxpayer expense? Y'all have deep pockets. You have all the taxpayers' pockets in the city to represent us. It's a conflict of interest. And then we had a JEA person who's a homeowner in there come to our meeting and record our HOA meeting on how to fight you. And she slid her phone recording the conversation, taking copious notes without identifying that she worked for JEA, her employer. That's outrageous. And when I said, stop the meeting, is there someone who works for JEA? Because I watched this woman laugh when we gave ideas to fight you. She would snicker and scoff and go, and then she slid her phone and then she would slide it under the table and send out. She finally admitted she worked for JEA. She's tried to convince our community these are a good thing and that our property values already reflect the power lines.
Ms. Franklin, we appreciate your comments today. And we hear your passion and your concerns. And what we would like to do is possibly, if possible, Mr. Zahn, to see if we could have yet another public meeting that allows you to have question and answers.
But I don't want just question and answer. I want the community. Y'all waited 10 years. Y'all hid this from us. And you put it on us at the last minute. And when we came to the February board meeting, you placated us and said, oh, we're going to have this meeting. You had it 2 days after your March board meeting. Then you scheduled it on the night Mike Pence came to town and Price is Right was in town. You purposely did that knowing you were going to cancel the April board meeting.
Ms. Franklin, we have 3 minutes for public comment, and we thank you. As I said today, we thank you. But we would like to make sure that we address your concerns.
I don't want to be placated, and neither does our community.
Ms. Stewart is in the back of the room. I know public comment is over, but if you'd like to speak with our Vice President of Customer Affairs, then she can help coordinate with you and get you the answers in the way that you would like that, if that's okay.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Next on the agenda, we have comments from City Councilman Schellenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no comments today. Thank you very much for the offer.
Thank you. All righty. Mr. Hightower, we have a presentation today?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Angel Vilches. I have been in the distribution operations for JEA for the past a little bit over 3 years, and I'm very proud to be working with these fine gentlemen here and with their brothers as well. I am my brother's keeper is a motto that they live every single day, and as Mr. Zan said this morning, safety is our #1 goal. We represented JEA in one of the events, one of the lineman's event this past March 2nd in Gainesville. We compete with 30 public power utilities within 200 competitors. We sent to this event, we sent 4 journeyman crews as well as 4 apprentices. The competition is to show not just the skills, but also the knowledge in this craft of line work. Let me introduce some of the guys that represent us on this event. On third place for 4 kV insulator change out, we have the team members of Gary Griffin, Matt Poncher, Jake Harley, and Adam Holland. As second place for the 12 kV dead end change out was Miles Hendricks, Wesley Norman, Josh Brickle, and Paul Bryant. First place on transmission belt change out was Cody Stokes, Chris Childs, David Hicken, and Josh Brown. And for the first place in 2 events on this same competition in Gainesville, on the 12 kV dead end change out and Herdman rescue, team members Robert Hess, Mike Corbett, Greg Johnson, and Chance Jones.
Are they all here today?
Yes.
Let's have a round of applause.
We also sent 4 journeyman teams and 4 apprentices to Colorado Springs on the March 30th. As you know, Colorado Springs has an altitude of over 6,000 feet, and we compete under extreme conditions. It was snowing. It was 26 degrees that day. It felt more like 15. We have nearly 400 competitors, 78 journeyman teams, and 130 apprentices. Participants from 22 states, and it was the largest rodeo in the past 19 years. And we got these results. We have the apprentice service connection, third place, Philip Nelson. Apprentice 3-phase fuse change out, first place, Philip Nelson. Journeyman Herdman rescue, first place, Cody Stokes, Chris Childs, Davey Hicken, and Josh Brown. Journeyman 12 kV pole transfer, first place, Mr. Robert Hess, Mike Corbett, Greg Johnson, and Chance Jones. We also got the second place in this event, Cody Stokes, Chris Childs, Davey Hickens, and Josh Brown. And the overall journeyman team, the difference within the first and second place on this event was of 0.3 of a second. Wow. So I consider them all winners, actually, even though it says second place. Robert Hess, Mike Corbett, Greg Johnson, and Chance Jones.
Fantastic. That is outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What I liked was the motto, and that is my brother's keeper.
Yeah.
In the line of the risk that our linemen take every day, that's a very important motto, is that we look out for one another.
Totally.
Mr. Hightower, our next presentation?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Directors. Today I have the distinct honor and privilege to make 3 introductions for 2 presentations. First, permit me a few moments to put into context the introductions and these presentations. Nearly 52 years ago, as a matter of fact, July 17th, 1967 to be exact, 3 individuals' lives intersected that would forever change the world's appreciation and respect for the important and dangerous work that our linemen do every day. Jacksonville Journey photographer Rocco Morgito was traveling in the north side part of Jacksonville that morning. 26-year-old Randall G. Champion was working on a utility pole more than 20 feet in the air when he came in contact with 4,000 voltage wire. 26-year-old J.D. Thompson was working 400 feet away, saw the life-threatening predicament of his co-worker, Randall Champion. Mr. Champion climbed the pole to assist Randall, found him not breathing. And with his recent training, deep concern for his co-worker, immediately his instincts kicked in. Jacksonville Journey photographer Rocco caught that iconic moment in time, now known the world over as the kiss of life that you see here on this stand. Randall Champion survived that day due to the tenacity, strength of will, and the training of his friend and co-worker, Mr. J.D. Thompson, behind me. Rocco's photo became the 1968 Pulitzer Prize. Randall would retire from JEA in 1993 with 30 years of service. Mr. Thompson retired in 1994 with 31 years of service. And to show the coincidence, both Mr. Thompson and Mr. Champion came to work 4 years earlier to that day on the same day. Fast forward to this past March that you heard Angel talk about Colorado Springs, and let me attest, it was closer to wind chill of 0. I was there. I have never been so cold in my life. That evening, during the awards banquet, 1,200 attendees rose to their feet in sincere honor and appreciation, and in some cases, true emotion, when Mr. Thompson was inducted into the International Lineman Hall of Fame. Please turn your attention to the TV screen for that extraordinary moment in both Mr. Thompson's life and now the lives of all journeymen and linemen who see this iconic photograph.
JEA earned plenty of recognition at the Public Power Line Workers Rodeo in Colorado Springs, but perhaps the biggest honor went to a retired JEA lineman. J.D. Thompson spent the day watching the grandchildren of his former colleagues compete in the rodeo. That night, he was inducted into the International Lineman Museum's Hall of Fame for saving a colleague's life in 1967. His heroic act was caught on camera, the photo published in the Jacksonville Journal with the headline, "The Kiss of Life." Not a week before, he had just been taught a new thing called mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
When I was running down the street, and I could see what the situation was, I was recalling in my mind what I had been trained to do, and I will emphasize the training part. And then you can handle it if you got that training.
So what does it mean to you to now be a member of the Lineman Hall of Fame?
Well, it means a lot to me to get an award like this from within the industry, you know.
Meanwhile, JEA's journeyman team of Robert Hess, Michael Corbett, and Greg Johnson won second place overall at the competition, missing first place by just 0.3 of a second. Cody Stokes, Christopher Childs, and David Hicken won first place in an event, the Hurt Man Rescue, and apprentice Philip Nelson won first in an apprentice event called the Three-Phase Fuse Changeout.
Madam Chair, when Mr. Thompson has been asked over the years about that special moment of what he did for his colleague Randall Champion, these were the three statements that he would repeat often. He said he was, 1, acting on his training; 2, thankful that he could revive his downed co-worker; and 3, and the most important, he was just doing his job. At this time, I would like Mr. Thompson to join me here at the podium. And at this time, I would like to introduce, Madam Chair, Mr. Andy Price, who is the founder and curator of the International Lineman Hall of Fame Museum in Shelby, North Carolina, for a very special presentation. Mr. Price? Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board.
Good morning.
Appreciate you having us here today. This gentleman beside me is iconic throughout the world. This may be a photo to many, but I can assure you it is the most famous photo of our industry. It is seen everywhere, and as I travel around the country, you'll see this displayed in lobbies at power companies everywhere I go. It's also proudly displayed in the International Lineman Museum Hall of Fame and has been there for many years. And Mr. Thompson was nominated for the Hall of Fame this year, and obviously was accepted and inducted for what he's done. One of the most humble men I've ever met, who always says I was just doing my job every time he and I have had this conversation. These guys behind me, they're to be congratulated for what they've done, and for Florida boys to go to Colorado in the snow and do as well as they did is to be commended as well. They put their lives on the line every single day. They do. At the turn of the century, 1 of every 2 linemen was actually killed on the job in the late 1800s. With safety practices, training, and education, obviously it's much safer today, but still ranks in about the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the country every day. So please realize what these guys do is very dangerous, but also what they do changes our lives daily, because without electricity, we would have nothing. I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Mr. Thompson and his family in Colorado Springs and induct him that night. And I can honestly say one of the greatest moments of my life to get to do that. It's an honor because he was always a hero of mine from the photo even before I got to meet him. That night in Colorado Springs, we presented him with a trophy. It says 2018 inductee, J.D. Thompson. So at this time, Madam Chair, we'd like to present this to you and JEA and the board to proudly display in your lobby.
We have one more presentation before he does that. Madam Chair, at this time, it is my personal honor and privilege to introduce a member of our winning, what I call our rock stars, Mr. Mike Corbett, who, by the way, is a 3rd-generation lineman, for a special presentation to Mr. Thompson.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board. One thing I would like to say real quick, if you notice, the one thing that we won in both rodeos was hurt man rescue. We take a lot of pride in that because obviously we do a dangerous job. And the bar was set 52 years ago with Mr. JD with what he did. That's one thing that we practice and we take pride in, knowing if someone does get hurt, we have the tools to take care of them if they do. With that being said, it's an honor. My dad worked with Mr. Thompson. My grandfather worked with Mr. Thompson. So it's real proudful for me to be able to do this. But being inducted into the Hall of Fame from JEA, we'd like to present Mr. Thompson with a ring from the Hall of Fame.
Very nice.
We thank you for setting the bar a long time ago and a standard for us to live up to. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all. Mr. Thompson?
All right. That's very nice. I appreciate this from the lineman. I appreciate it from JEA. I would tell you, you really need to be proud of these men out there. They really did a fantastic job. I was there that day. I stayed through the whole thing, and it was cold now. But the most amazing thing to me is the way they have learned to use this new safety strap that we never used. And it's a good thing, because I have come to the ground faster than I wanted to sometimes. But when I first heard of this, I said, how in the world do you get any work done? But they can make it happen. Now, you've seen them go up that pole and throw in that thing. And it was really good. So you need to be proud of them. The other thing is, just from riding around and looking, the advancements that's been made within the JEA distribution system, you've really improved this thing since I left, just from looking at it. And the board and the management here need to be congratulated for that. The service has really got to be a lot better than we had years ago. The other thing, your safety record. I know there's always problems, and you have to stay on top of it, but it's so much improved to what it was with us years ago. During my time with JEA, there was 5 men killed, and a lot of this is due to the safety that the board is making the management stand up to, and getting it right down to the workers. And it's a daily thing. You have to really be on it every day. So I appreciate what's been done by the board and the management. And thank you all very much. I appreciate this.
Sure.
The rest of the board, take a photo.
Hello, board.
Might have to move up this way a little bit. Fit everybody behind. You got it. That was just the two. All right, ready? Oh, I'm not tall enough for this. And 3, 2, and there we go. One more. 3, 2, and.
Excellent.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, in closing, I met Mr. Hightower in Colorado Springs and was very, very impressed with his passion for this industry. And we've asked him to fill one of the board seats on the Lyman Museum Hall of Fame board, and he's graciously accepted, so we do appreciate that.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Thank you. I think about the job that the linemen do, and I think about my fear of heights, but more importantly, the running, through the danger that you put yourselves in. And I say this again, the motto, my brother's keeper, and Mr. Thompson is a prime example of that. And we just thank everyone. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have another award.
Yeah.
By Mr. Zahn.
First, we're going to recognize a past board member, Mr. Cummer, who's here in the audience, and thank him for his service. We miss you, but you don't miss us, I'm sure.
No, last time I was here, there was only one lawyer at the table. Now there's two, so.
Thank you very much for all your service and everything you did for JEA. Really appreciate it. And then we have a meter for you as well.
Sebby.
Great. This is the bypass.
That's the bypass. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. All right, let's keep moving.
Much is also, we also want to announce that JEA won an award from the Florida Water Environmental Association and Florida Benchmarking Consortium related to the work that the water side has done relative to performance and operational metrics. It's a benchmarking metrics around about 30 or so utilities in the state of Florida, recognizing specifically around sanitary sewer overflows and some of the operational performance on the water side. And this will be on presentation in the lobby and at board meetings in the coming months.
Okay. Thank you. Congratulations. All right, next I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
That's a first from Ms. Johnson Lee and second from Mr. Howard. Any comments?
One quick comment. You'll notice that on the consent agenda is the annual disclosure reports, which are the required reports for SEC regulatory practices. You have to your left some change pages that have been changed since the prior distribution. If you would please do me the favor of take a moment to review these, because your approval today will be approval of not only the annual disclosures that you've seen, but also these change pages. And they were circulated as well, if by me, I believe it was Friday night when we sent them around. So these are not different from what you'd seen.
Has everyone had a chance to review them prior to today?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we're ready to move forward. I think we've all reviewed them. So with that, having a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion has been adopted as presented. Thank you. Next, we have our strategy presentation by Ms. Dykes and Mr. Wanamaker.
Financials.
First, operational update.
Oh, skipped over that. Let's do my monthly financials by Ms. Dykes.
The dashboard is included in the package that you received on Diligent. Rather than go through the dashboard as we do each month, though, what we thought we would do is show you an example of how we communicate this information out to our employees.
As they're pulling it up, one of the things that Melissa and the team have done in the last number of quarters is, as you know, we're trying to really drive the understanding of the dashboard and the 4 measures of value of JEA throughout the organization, and the videos that have been distributed have caught on, and as a good way of putting them out for all the employees.
I'm getting the 1 second signal.
The anticipation's killing us.
Hello, everyone. With the second quarter behind us, I wanted to stop and recognize all the hard work that is happening each day at JEA. Best way to do that? Well, we're sticking to our video format based on all the positive feedback that we've received from the Q1 video. So using CSEF, our 4 corporate measures of value, Melissa Dykes will start off our second quarter highlights with a great example of customer value.
Thanks, Aaron. The corporate dashboard we use to report to the board every month is not just another Excel worksheet.
It's a working document available to everyone on the grid. It represents how each and every JEA employee contributes to JEA's success. That's why one manager in the Water Wastewater Division is using the dashboard to explain to his employees why they need to try a new way of doing things when it comes to customer response time.
Kyle Schottler is JEA's Manager of System Operations and Customer Response for the Water and Wastewater Division. Currently, Water and Wastewater's average priority response time is 66 minutes, but the corporate goal is to get it down to 65 minutes or less. In reviewing department data, Kyle recently came across some numbers that could lead to a breakthrough.
Backup tickets are our third highest frequency ticket. Backup at the house, that is. But that can stem from it being a private issue, it could be a JEA issue, it could be a pipe failure, it could be a clog in the line, it could be a clog inside the house. So it takes a lot of investigation.
Kyle and his team believe if they can improve response time for backup tickets alone, it should improve response time overall. So Kyle came up with a plan to try and do this.
Hey Jason, it's Clarence. Hey, I got a party complaining about a sewer backup at 947 Winter Road.
Here's the plan. When a wastewater dispatcher sends a troubleshooter on a backup call, the troubleshooter will bring along a Harbin trailer, a jetter machine that clears clogs in pipes. The Harbin may only provide a temporary fix to the backup, but that's usually enough to make a customer happy until a permanent solution is found. Since this idea is so new, no one knows if it will improve response time yet. But even if it doesn't, Kyle's director is still pleased.
But just the idea that they're thinking that what they do every day and how they put boots on the ground affects that board metric, just wanted to go ahead, put it out there. We're not afraid to fail.
There's a lot that will affect the success of this plan, not least of which is traffic. The water wastewater territory is huge. It stretches from Yulee to Ponte Vedra with lots of cars and lots of miles in between. But keep an eye on the dashboard to see if the already low water wastewater response time gets even lower and hits the corporate goal. In the meantime, good luck to Kyle and his team, and thank you for such innovative thinking. Now to Carrie for a community value highlight.
Thank you, Melissa. One of the important things we track on the corporate dashboard is the number of hours our ambassadors and volunteers contribute to the community. Right now, through the second quarter, our employees have completed 3,423 hours in the community with a goal for the year of 4,800 hours. We know what great value we bring to the community, and we want to make sure our customers know that too. That's why we've started a series of TV commercials on WJXT called JEA's Community Minute. Take a look.
Time now for JEA's Community Minute.
Hello everyone, I am JEA line maintainer Tommy Hayes.
And I'm Hope Tepper, Assistant Principal at Enterprise Learning Academy, an elementary school in Duval County. Career Day is a great way for our students to learn about their community and the people who work in it. As part of that special day, they get to meet a real JEA lineman.
We always start our talks by talking about safety and giving the students their very own hard hat. Students also get to try on the big rubber gloves that we all wear to protect ourselves from electric voltage.
The other big attraction for the students are the vehicles that the linemen and the other first responders bring with them.
The kids all want to go up in the bucket trucks, but we can't let them for safety reasons. But we can show them the retractable poles we use instead of the bucket if the work we need to do is closer to the ground. Plus, the horn on our bucket trucks is always a big hit. And if you'd like to book a lineman for your career day at your child's school, visit JEA.com/ambassador.
These commercials run every Tuesday during the 6 o'clock news on WJXT. Not only do they highlight your great work in the community, but the school or nonprofit's hard work as well. And that's a great win for our customers and for Northeast Florida. Now to Paul to talk about the E in CSEF, environmental value.
Thank you, Carrie. Change is constant in the energy industry, and JEA is recognizing and adapting to that changing landscape every day. Part of this change includes a carbon-constrained future, which is why we monitor CO2 emissions on the dashboard. As you can see from this graph, we have lowered our carbon emission output by over 30% over the last 5 years as we modernize the generation fleet and continue expansion of renewable energy. The St. Johns River Power Park, a coal fuel burning facility, was voluntarily decommissioned in 2018, and several efficiency improvements have been made to our Brandy Branch generating station's natural gas units, further reducing our emissions output. Even before Power Park decommissioning, we had been steadily decreasing our carbon emissions output by increased use of our natural gas generation units. These fleet modernization efforts are being coupled with an extensive expansion of our renewable energy portfolio, which further reduces our carbon footprint. Through the development of utility-scale solar projects, we will have added nearly 300 megawatts of solar power by the end of 2022. This expansion positions us to become one of the largest municipal providers of solar PV power in the nation. By the way, because of all this solar, JEA was again chosen as a sunriser utility by the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. That's environmental value for our community and our region. Now to Ryan for financial highlights.
Thanks, Paul. I can't believe the year is more than halfway over. On the corporate dashboard, we have a metric for percent of net O&M budget. Our goal is to be at or below 95%. Through the first 6 months of the fiscal year, we have spent $188.4 million on O&M. Our total O&M budget for 2019 is $396.7 million, meaning that we have spent 47.5% of our budget through the first 6 months. If we could just double that, we would be right on target at 95%. But historically, we spend more in the second half of the year. Based on historical trends, we are forecasting to come in at $391.7 million, which is 99% of our budget, or about $15 million higher than our target for the metric. So what can you do to help solve this cause? We need everyone to think of ways to save money this fiscal year and beyond. In fact, the electric division is already doing just that. It's changing the way it thinks about planned outages, particularly when and how often they're needed.
Traditionally, JEA has always scheduled its major repair work on large generation units based on calendar year. It made sense because the units were base loaded, which means they were run consistently year after year. But electric generation is changing. Demand is down and electricity can be cheaper to buy than generate. So it stands to reason that the way we maintain these big units is changing too.
It's kind of like driving your car and doing maintenance and changing the oil in your car. You don't do it just every 2 months or 3 months. You do it when you put enough miles on your car to justify it. Today we're looking at how many hours we're actually running the units, how much time we're putting on the equipment, and we're basing our maintenance based on that time frame now, service hours instead of calendar hours.
Northside Unit 2 is a perfect example of this. Based on the old calendar approach, JEA would have done a 30-day outage this fall. But Unit 2 is currently offline for economy and looks like it will remain that way through most of the summer. Since we're not operating Unit 2 or putting miles on the car, we can cancel the fall outage and still stay within safe guidelines for the equipment, which will save JEA $3.3 million.
What Bob didn't mention is that this runtime approach is a way of thinking that investor-owned utilities have been using for a while now. Great job, Northside team. Keep up the good work. The reason we pay so much attention to O&M is because it impacts EBITDA. You may remember we touched on EBITDA in our last video. And since then, I've been trying to come up with a new way to explain it to you that you'd better understand what it means and why it's important to JEA. EBITDA, as you may remember, stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a big accounting principle, but don't think of it that way. Think of it as your take-home pay. Everyone gets a salary, and we all know that you don't get all of that money in your checking account every 2 weeks. You have things that you have to pay for, like taxes, pension contributions, insurance, and maybe other benefits. When you get your paycheck, you only have so much money to pay your bills, your mortgage or rent, car payment, credit card companies, and groceries. If you run out of money before the end of the month, you have to dip into your savings or you go into debt to make up the difference. The same goes for JEA. EBITDA is kind of like JEA's take-home pay. It is the money we receive from customers minus operating costs, fuel, purchase power, and O&M. The cash flow that we have left over is our take-home pay to pay for pipes and wires, our debt service, and the city contribution. If we don't generate enough, we must dip into our savings to pay for the rest or borrow the money. Many of you have been here for a long time. Multiple waves of JEA CFOs and CEOs have talked about the need to pay down our debt for over a decade now. Our debt peaked in 2010 at $6.3 billion because we simply didn't have enough EBITDA. Simply put, we had maxed out our credit cards. We had to find a way to get more take-home pay. So we raised rates. Since 2006, we've raised base rates by 71% on electric and 72% on water. It was kind of like getting a second job. But rate increases are not good for customer value or community impact value. This is why we are talking about trying to find other sources of revenue, not just rates. By focusing on EBITDA and O&M spend, you can help drive 3 of the 4 measures of value. All departments can save. I know we can. We have smart people working here at JEA. Good ideas come from all levels of the organization. So please share your ideas with your managers and directors, and let's start saving. Aaron, back to you.
Thank you, Ryan. And if you didn't believe me before, these second quarter financial numbers are exactly why JEA needs to branch out into other sources of revenue and profitability. We need to be able to control our destiny. We need to be able to increase EBITDA. Meanwhile, I have great faith that the entire JEA team will conquer the challenges that lay ahead of us in our industry. This new TV spot shows exactly how each and every one of you can make a difference. It is part of a larger marketing campaign that you will be seeing a lot more of in the coming days. It's called The Power of One. Enjoy.
One innovation can preserve and protect our water supply for decades to come. One investment can make renewable energy accessible to everyone. One person can inspire a generation to follow their dreams. One alert can safeguard thousands of customers during a storm. One change can save a household hundreds of dollars a year. One commitment can better an entire neighborhood. And one community can decide to leave things better than they found it. At JEA, we have one purpose: to improve lives through ongoing innovation. It's what drives each and every one of us every day. And if one person, with one idea, can make one difference, just imagine what we can all do together. Improving lives, building community. JEA.
And that concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions on the dashboard.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have a question, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out in Mr. Cumber's absence and in a nod to Mr. Thompson's kudos to the team for your new and improved distribution semi-5 performance. Wow, way to go. It's great.
Thank you. The team's been working hard at that metric. We've also gotten fortunate with some weather that's helped with that. But we're very proud of that metric. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Great report.
Anyone else? Are we just now starting to provide the financial metrics to the team?
We provide them once a quarter. So we post the dashboard every month. We invite our team members to watch the board meeting so that they get a chance to see what we report out to the board. And then we do these video updates that break it down and make it more personal for our employees every quarter.
I'm pretty sure it allows the employees to feel like they're making a difference to the bigger picture. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not only feel, but they actually are.
They are.
Not to correct you,
but sometimes
yeah.
we come to work every day and we feel like, we're not moving the
That's
needle
right,
when in
yeah.
fact you really are.
Absolutely.
All righty. Next we have Mr. McCarthy for the procurement and JSEP presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll be providing our JSEP program report for FY19 Q2. And for everyone, JSEP is an acronym for our Jacksonville Small and Emerging Business Program, and that's our small business program that we support. The short story is we had a strong results for this past quarter, and we're on track for another strong year. This is our JSEP scorecard. It shows our JSEP spend for the first 2 quarters of FY19 and provides a 5-year trend. Working from the left, our JSEP spend from the first 2 quarters was that $8.9 million, approximately $9 million versus a goal of $7.5 million, which is our mid-year amount. We set the goal at 23% of our available spend. So 23% of the $65 million, that's how we get to the $15 million. And the 14% is a mid-year number, which if we continue on that pace, we would end up at 28%. Looking at the right, our year-to-year JSEP spend comparison continues to grow at an impressive clip. It's basically doubling every 4 to 5 years. This slide shows our top vendor spend during the first 2 quarters of FY19. These companies are prospective mentors for new JSEP companies, and we take their testimonials to share with others to get them engaged, and it provides a benefit to both them and us. Going down the list are a wide range of products and services, including materials, landscaping, well drilling, facilities and civil engineering, and staff augmentation services. So outreach is a big emphasis for us, and this slide shows our outreach events held during FY19 Q2. On the left, you'll see we do a Doing Business with JEA workshop every month, and you'll see the other events held during Q2, and a couple of themes there. They involve elected officials. We work jointly with other agencies, and we also target upcoming opportunities. And I just highlight the targeted event, the 2/21/19 is the septic tank phase-out construction project for Biltmore C, and it's now going through our bidding process. So this slide shows current opportunities we're working on. I just mentioned the septic tank phase-out project on the left, and you can see all the project details there. A lot of work has gone into this. We've set a 20% JSEB goal. We actually opened bids last Tuesday, but we only received 2 bids, and so we're going to extend it another 3 weeks and hold another mandatory pre-bid and try to get more participation. Our current opportunities, other current opportunities are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see we have a lot of opportunities, and at the bottom are the larger ones in terms of dollars, and they involve water and sewer engineering type work. This slide shows outreach events for FY19 Q3. It's very active. We had a very active quarter. When you add up our monthly workshops, plus the other events, we had 8 events we were involved with during the quarter. And you see on the bottom right hand, we did our first annual JSEB Summit last year, which was very well attended. And we're planning our second annual there for August 15, 2019. And I just conclude by saying the success of the program is a company-wide effort with strong leadership from the board and elected officials. A good example was recently provided in April. If you remember, we had the special board meeting for the downtown headquarters evaluation, which was valuing strong participation in our JSEP program, and I'm confident we're going to get good JSEP participation in that program. And that concludes my presentations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board?
No.
I just have one quick question. Well, that's a good point. Reverend Newbill, do you have any questions?
No, I just want to commend John for a continuation of what we know has to be done in order to raise those numbers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Quick question. Of the top performers, are any of them newly qualified companies?
Thank you for the question. We actually have a metric to add at least 5 companies during the year, and we've added 5 now at this point in the year.
Are any of those listed in the top performers for so far?
I would have to defer. No, they're smaller and they're just getting started with us.
Just getting started.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Okay, next we have Carrie with Hurricane Readiness Readout.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Still feels weird saying good morning. I want to give you all a brief overview today of our hurricane preparedness. I am sure you are all keenly aware, as all of us employees are, that officially hurricane season starts next week. And so while we were very fortunate in the last fiscal year, the last calendar year, that we didn't have a significant weather event, we did learn a lot from the previous 2 significant events that we had, and we tested those last year. Fortunately, we didn't have to use it, but wanted to talk a little bit today about what we've been doing in the meantime and how we have started to flex those muscles to, again, re-exercise our memory from the last 2 storms that we did have, even though they were some time ago.
JEA's annual hurricane exercise is a little like spring training.
If you take the field and you have a plan in place and everyone knows their role and the expectations, then the chances of success are significantly higher.
This year's exercise simulated not just one, but 2 hurricanes. A Cat 2 named Jackson and a stronger Cat 4 named Wally.
We wanted to practice more scenarios to include if we get the big one. And the big one is where you get in a post-disaster recovery, and it's a longer process. And actually we've got a 5-day exercise this week that's going to continue another 4 weeks where we exercise our business continuity plan.
On day 2 of the exercise, JEA's Incident Command returned to a Cat 5 rated building where they'll hunker down if a storm is severe enough. On day 3, JEA heard from special guest Frankie Lum, Emergency Management Specialist in Bay County, a county that's still reeling from the aftermath of Hurricane Michael.
Storm surge. Okay, it's always been famous in emergency management that you run from water and you hide from wind. That's not a thing anymore, by the way. You run from everything.
Much of the exercise took place in JEA's new Emergency Operations Center, located in JEA's old printing facility. Here, there were presentations on Storm Geo, JEA's new weather software that gives JEA specific weather reports, and on a new software that's an outgrowth of JEA's Innovation Lab. It's called Augmented Operational Intelligence. It tracks every pumping station in JEA's system and tells operators how full the station is and if it has power.
We're better prepared than we've ever been to be able to respond effectively after a storm. And advancing the exercise this year from preparedness and response to a relatively small storm to full community redevelopment after a very large event is the most mature that we've ever been in terms of hurricane preparedness and response. So this was a great exercise. I feel very good heading into storm season. Let's hope we never have to use it.
So in addition to the exercises that were performed a couple of weeks ago and the business continuity exercises that we're currently undergoing, please know that year-round we work towards storm hardening for all of our systems. On the energy side of the house, it is what you think it would be. It's pole replacements, it's tree trimming, other hardening programs that make the system more resilient. We also have deployed technology to help us manage the duration of the outages, and obviously the goal is to reduce the duration. We're currently in the 2nd year of a 4-year, $30 million program that allows us, or allows the staff, to identify the location of the fault, to isolate it, and to complete restoration work faster than we ever have before. After Irma, you may remember this board approved the accelerated rollout of 2-way meters, and we are now 78% complete within our service territory. This is electric meters, this is residential. This allows us to gather real-time data about what's happening in the field, not just with the customers, but with our own system. There are additional benefits to the 2-way meter rollout, but again, we're on target to have 100% of our residential territory completed by spring of 2020. On the water side, storm hardening also is related to energy. Our pump stations and lift stations, as you know, require energy to work. Something that we are very proud of is that we have more pump stations than any wastewater system in the country. I know you get that fact a lot. Daryl likes to say it's a fun cocktail party fact to share with your friends. But what we've been doing on the water side is hardening our service through further vegetation management, strategic line improvements, as well as relocating certain of our electric or energy systems underground so that we can harden them to these facilities. And what this has allowed us to do is significantly reduce the number or the gallons of SSOs that come out of the system when we have large water flows into our system. You can see that even between Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma, when there was significantly more flow to the systems, we had significantly fewer SSOs. And this is in a large part to hardening the stations, make sure that we have hardened generation attached to the pump stations, but we also have backup generation in case the systems fail. From emergency planning, we also have worked very hard to model different weather scenarios. What we have learned through the years that no weather system, no weather impact is exactly the same. And So we have been workshopping the results of modeling to identify and prioritize mitigation of critical facilities like hospitals and schools, those types of customers that we bring up online as a matter of priority, but also to identify our own facilities that have the highest flood risk and to do what we can to mitigate those risks. Technology improvements have also been made through the years. We are now able to provide better information to our customers using that meter data, especially on our outage map on JEA.com. We have moved to a hardened facility. CoLogix is a Cat 5 rated facility that you saw on the video that preceded this presentation. You also saw that we're using StormGeo online weather forecasting service, which gives us a much more granular understanding of flooding risks, wind, and all types of weather events, highly localized to our specific area. We also needed another acronym at JEA, so we adopted Augmented Operational Intelligence, which is a mouthful. It's a geospatial interactive 3D map. And what it really does, and what you probably saw a depiction of on the video, was to let us know what's happening in our pump stations and our lift stations in real time in 3D. Restoration 123 was an offshoot of Hurricane Irma, when we recognized that we had real communication issues during and after a storm. We created a program called Restoration 123. All employees were required to take this training last year. You'll see on the next slide how we educate our customers on Restoration 123, but it's specifically focused on training gray sky areas that are critical to storms as well as restoration efforts. And those are our customer service reps, field operations folks, the ticket processors, and business account reps, making sure that we get our largest customers back online and doing business. This particular education program for our customers asks for a series of calls to action for our customers. Make a personal plan. And if you're at the cocktail party and you don't remember the number of pump stations that we have in our territory, maybe start talking about what your friends and family could do to make it easier during times of storm and when we're trying to restore. Update their account contact information. Download and read the JEA Storm Recovery Guide. Sign up for outage alert preferences. And then once the storm subsides, visit JEA.com outage map for information and updates. This year, we've prepared a multimedia campaign that will be starting in June. 15 30-second television radio spots, the digital outdoor boards, which work very well. And this is highlighted in red because this is the first time we've actually partnered with the city of Jacksonville. And we are actually in their storm guide with them, and we co-branded with them this year, and it's going out to 416 residences in the Duval County area. So we didn't reach our entire service territory, but again, this is the first time that we were a part of this incredibly valuable tool for the folks that live in Northeast Florida. And there you'll see the other ways that we get our message out and educate our customers. And I'll end with the spot that will be running shortly.
After a major storm, you can count on JEA to safely restore power as quickly as possible, beginning with critical infrastructure, hospitals, shelters, and police and fire stations. Next, we put all of our resources into restoring power to neighborhoods and businesses. And we won't stop until every customer's outage is resolved. Because when the community you serve is home, there's more than power on the line. Learn more at JEA.com.
That concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Any questions from the board or comments?
I had a question. When I was reviewing the materials over the weekend, Carrie, I had hoped to see something under the Technology Improvements tab that addressed the concerns after Irma that your team had identified regarding the failure of systems to communicate with one another and the inability of the first-line customer response team to give accurate information back. Can you briefly update the board on what improvements have been made on the system's ability to communicate better information to our first-line responders to our customers?
Absolutely. You'll remember that was the focus of Restoration 123. And so while we just sort of glossed over it here, for those of you who weren't here, the issue was our technology and the systems that provided information from the customer to the call center to SOC to allow us to give appropriate estimated restoration times. So we worked diligently with our technology department, with the energy department, and with our comms department to make sure that all of these systems are working well. We test them frequently. We tested them during the last week or a couple of weeks ago when we did the hurricane operations training just to make sure they still work. Restoration 123 was born out of the fact that we need to not talk over each other during the early stages of a storm or when the storm subsides. We were having tickets that were being created by our call center agents. We were having tickets that were being created out at our system operations center. We were having tickets that were being created by customers themselves by going to JEA.com and reporting outages. And so phase one is literally, we know you're out. Because of the accelerated meter deployment, as well as better tools that we have throughout our grid system, we know where our largest outages are. And if you will just wait, and we ask our customers to be patient, they can still call in, they can still go to JEA.com, but the education is really heavily on phase one to allow us time to bring those systems back up. Their systems or their electricity, their energy will likely come back up very quickly in that first phase. The second phase is where we ask our customers to call in so that we can put in new tickets. We may not know that you're out. We may have restored a line on Blanding Boulevard, but you're on a lateral off of Blanding Boulevard, so we need you to call in. We're going to be checking your meters after that point, but really the outgrowth of Irma's communication breakdown was to try not to talk all over each other during that first phase. And to have better processes in place between the customer care associates, between our system operating center, and the technology that supports our website, our meters, as well as all of the other systems that talk to each other, but we're talking over each other during Irma. And I know it was pretty painful for us that we're miscommunicating with our customers.
Well, a follow-up. Thank you for that, and I'm glad to hear that improvements have been made. As I recall, one of the biggest issues was that a customer who had perhaps left their home, staying in a hotel in Georgia, check online and they see, oh, service is back up at their home, but it was really only we brought up the substation at the end of the street or in their neighborhood, and when they got to their actual home, it's like, no. Maybe two-way meters will help with that process, but is there anything in the interim that will cover that gap in information this storm season?
We will not send messages to our customers to tell them that their power has been restored unless we know that their power has been restored. We're no longer going to rely on specific circuit information. Our teams will ride the circuits, is a term that they use to make sure that every customer on that line is back in power before we send the messages. And all of that data will link up with our outage map, so that all of the information a customer might see, a customer care agent might see, system operations might see, will be the same.
Okay. That helps. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? I just have a quick question. When I think about the call to action plan, we're asking our customers to be patient with us, and then, of course, their next step to call in to really reconfirm what we already know. We should already know. I think about oxygen-dependent customers. Is that data that our customers can provide to us so that we know who and then if so, is there a procedure in place that we either contact fire and rescue, or how do we handle those oxygen-dependent customers?
We have many medically dependent, electric medically dependent customers throughout our territory. They, along with their physician, sign an affidavit that that is what's happening. So we also make sure that during regular blue sky, we don't accidentally or turn off their electricity. So we know where they are. They sign up with us. Now, they are not a priority if they are in an individual residential home for storm restoration. They are urged by their physician and by the county's emergency management system to go someplace that is either a shelter or that is out of the path of the storm. But we do know where they are. We also, county emergency management also knows where they are. And again, we keep a list that is updated. I think it's every 2 years they have to re-up and provide a further affidavit of their energy needs.
Are they educated on what to do when they sign up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. All right. We're going to move on to the strategy discussion of the agenda, and we have Ms. Dykes coming back as well as Mr. Wanamaker.
So as a reminder, one of the things that the board did in May of last year was change the format of its board meetings to have 3 specific sections. The first section being operations, where action can be taken. The second section to be strategy, that allows the board to be able to discuss in depth specific strategy planning that the management team and board are undertaking. And then C, the third section being an education or subject matter exploration. As you've heard at the beginning of this board meeting, JEA likes to compete. We have 2,000 people that like to compete. And we like to compete because we're taking care of 1.5 million people. I would say this frog's probably not doing a very good job at competing. If you're familiar with the boiled frog theory, you take a frog, you put it in a pot of water, slowly elevate the temperature, and at some point in time, the frog will stay there until it's boiled. You take a boiled frog, you throw them in a pot of water that's boiling, and they'll jump out immediately. With that end, we have started strategic planning with McKinsey in January, and this is the first step of really looking at what is the long-term strategic plan for JEA. As we've discussed, the first step of that is always to figure out what happens if you do nothing. To that end, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rohde to read a disclaimer.
The following status quo baseline financial projections are presented solely for JEA Board of Directors planning and action in connection with the development of a strategic plan. They are not a projection of future financial performance and, as such, should not be relied upon by present or prospective JEA bond investors to purchase or sell any security or to make an investment decision. The remainder of this disclaimer is available for your review in the board package materials.
So as a reminder, this board and I and the entire community, I believe, lived through a long transition starting in April of last year and concluding really at the beginning of this year in January with the guiding principles and an agreement upon not only how to measure what matters. If you hear, there's a very famous book, Measure What Matters. And the critical thing is you're running a business, driving a car, or heck, even performing CPR. In the ER, I'm married to an ER doctor, when you walk in, it's ABC, airway, breath, circulation. And it's in that order for a reason, because it doesn't matter where the heart is if the airway is clogged. And so we went through transition and have emerged, as you've seen, with the quarterly reports, and we're starting to drive EBITDA, and we're starting to think about the metrics that matter relative to JEA continuing to remain relevant to its customers. As a reminder, where we are is in step 2, and this is a report out by the management team on what we call the status quo, and then as this board and management team move forward, we'd be moving into multiple scenario strategy plans. It's commonly referred to practice in the military, known as scenario planning, where you evaluate multiple scenarios of what the future might hold before you ultimately conclude on one and start moving forward in terms of execution. I am not going to review this in depth, but this is just a more detailed output of what we plan as the deliverables to this board. It is not all inclusive, but it is the major deliverables out of each one of these steps. As you can see, we have completed the status quo. As this board has talked about, we measured culture, the baseline OHI, Organizational Health Index, and have started making great gains in terms of investing in the culture of JEA around becoming an adaptable culture. And then we will eventually be moving into strategy development. A reminder on what the status quo is. It is a viable scenario for JEA looking forward to 2030. It is, in fact, a financial plan and an operational plan that considers what happens if we continue doing things the way we've always done it. I think this board's heard me say before, those words are oftentimes not allowed anymore in JEA, but it is intended to be a tool so that the City Council knows what happens if JEA does nothing. There have been many times, and we'll talk a little bit about this, in terms of how JEA has tried to approach growth and opportunity in the past, that oftentimes the misalignment of management teams or board or city council or mayor or employee base has caused for JEA to miss out. What it is not is, this is not actually a plan that we are recommending for execution today. This is part of the strategy discussion, and it is not intended to be a tool for making investment decisions for our investors. It is also not a substitute for the planning documents that we utilize in the integrated water resource plan. Integrated water resource plan and our integrated resource plan around electric for how we plan on serving our customers. That's more of an engineering tool. So with that, it is moving on though and thinking about what does CSEF, our customer, community, environmental, and financial value look like if we continue operating status quo. This is where the value of that guiding principle document that was approved by the board of directors with the input of over our 2,000 employees will become so valuable as we remain consistent on making sure why does JEA exist, i.e. to improve the lives of each and every one of our customers and our community at large, as well as how do we measure that success. To that end, the board is aware, coming out in November, I gave the company 5 basic focal points, which are near-term focus points for us to work on in terms of driving those measures both now and in the future. And today is a discussion of headline priority number 5. To that end, Ms. Dykes.
Thanks, Aaron. The best water and wastewater utilities in the country are prioritizing 3 main things. They're prioritizing conservation, resource recovery, and alternative supplies of water. As one of the best water utilities in the country, both financially and operationally, JEA has the privilege of leading in each of these 3 areas. And while so many other water and wastewater utilities around the country are struggling with real infrastructure needs, with decaying infrastructure, we are very operationally well positioned to be able to plan for the future, not just today and not just tomorrow, but to be able to provide clean, reliable, safe, and affordable water and wastewater services long into the future. One example of operational excellence that we're very proud of is protecting the health of the St. Johns River. We have reduced nitrogen to the river by 60% over the same time period that our population grew by 37%. Over the last 12 months, we've posted the lowest nitrogen discharge to the river in the history of JEA, and we're very proud of that operational performance. We have a pristine source of water in the Floridan aquifer, and it is plentiful enough to meet our needs for today. But as we look to the future, we need to ensure that our community is prepared for what's coming. We will one day run out of water. Whether that happens in 2030 or 2040, we need to be prepared and treat all water as a scarce natural resource. We built our reclaimed water system from scratch to 14,000 customers today. Excuse me. And while we're proud of having built that system, and it will continue to be an important source of water for the community, it likely will not be enough to meet all of our community's water demands into the future forever. Less than 3% of water on Earth is fresh water. And as we're preparing for a water-constrained world in our community, we're preparing by piloting technologies like purifying water from alternative sources into fresh, pure drinking water. When JEA took over the water and wastewater system in 1997, it inherited a system that had pretty significant operational and environmental challenges. Thank you so much. We are proud of the investments we have made to transform the system into a leading water and wastewater utility today. And now we're focused on expanding our communication efforts around this system so that we can include our customers and community in our conversations. And we do that through pieces like this one.
Water. It's part of our lives. It is vital to the way we live, the way we work, the way we play. Water is critically important to life itself. But what happens if the water resource we count on just wasn't enough for all of us anymore? That's something we think about every day at JEA. Because although our drinking water supply exceeds our needs today, we must still plan for the future. Coming from the pure waters of the aquifer, our supply of drinking water will face challenges. As our area grows, our water supply is approaching its sustainable limit. Although our residents and businesses do an excellent job of conserving water, conservation alone simply isn't enough to assure our supply for the future. That's why JEA is taking a forward-looking approach to assuring a sustainable water supply for generations to come. One innovative solution is recharging the aquifer with purified, reclaimed water, which exceeds drinking water standards. It's been proven elsewhere, but JEA is undertaking an investigation to see if it's the best approach for all of us here in Northeast Florida. At JEA, we don't take water for granted, which is why we're exploring the technologies that can provide all of us with a safe, abundant water supply for tomorrow and long into the future.
Given the amount of video content in today's board meeting, I would be remiss if I did not thank our phenomenally talented communications team who puts these things together through magic. So I just wanted to say thanks to them.
I was just sitting here thinking, did the senior leadership team think they were going to have to be actors?
No, I can definitively answer that one. As the video discussed, we are piloting a water purification system as part of an integrated water resources plan. The purpose of the plan is to pull together all the components of the integrated water life cycle so that we can optimize water sustainability for our community and protect our water supply and our environment long into the future. JEA has invested over $4 billion in infrastructure since we took over the system in 1997. Over the next 5 years, we plan to invest another $1.2 billion in things like system expansion, upkeep, resiliency, environmental stewardship, and we're going to do all of that without the need to issue new debt. We'll continue to be a leader in 3 key areas in water and wastewater. The first is water quality initiatives. That includes things like our septic tank phase-out program that we have jointly with the City of Jacksonville. We're looking forward to breaking ground in July on the very first neighborhood of that new program. And we'll continue to work toward being able to phase out septic tanks in our community. But it also includes studying whether technology advancements can offer a better solution for our community, because while the septic tanks that are being phased out through this program are important, we have 65,000 septic tanks in Duval County. It's a staggering problem in terms of cost, and we're going to be studying how we can do it more effectively in the future. We lead in water supply initiatives like the Purified Water Program that we talked about, and we lead in storm and climate change resiliency. But these initiatives also create a large funding need long into the future, much of which is unfunded today and will continue to be a financial challenge, not just for JEA and our system, but for our entire community. Our water business is a story of excellence and stewardship. Our energy business is a story of technology disruption. Exponential technology advancements in things like transportation, data, generation, storage, advanced materials for buildings, appliances, and the list goes on, have really transformed our business in ways that we've just never imagined. And new competitors are entering this space every single day. If you look back a decade ago, traditional utilities were really the only game in town. They were natural monopolies. Today, more and more companies that you recognize are becoming energy companies too. They're companies like Facebook and Amazon, Netflix, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, and then the list goes on. And more companies are entering that space and creating competition for traditional utilities. One kind of wild example, the Firestone Tire Company has recently announced they're trying to commercialize a technology that would allow people to generate electricity from tires. And those are the kinds of technology advancements that are really driving change in our business. Shell is the 4th largest oil company in the world. They announced publicly that they plan to be the largest electricity provider in the world by 2030. It is a substantial change for our business. And disruption's becoming the new normal, not just for our industry, but for so many industries. And even those in the traditional infrastructure space. So consider, for example, the telecom industry, which for nearly a century carried voice over copper wire all over the world and was considered to be an essential infrastructure service. Fiber optics completely transformed the way we communicate. This is by the way, commitment to a presentation. I'm about to take out a piece of hair. So a thread of glass fiber, the width of a human hair, can carry as much voice traffic as thousands of copper wires. And it's that technology advancement that completely transformed telecom from the old over copper wires industry to one that is completely transformed today. It really spelled the end of the traditional wireline utility.
I'm glad Ryan didn't have to give that demonstration.
That's the difference between long haul carriers and short haul carriers. Wireless.
Few of us have a landline telephone at home today, and those who do are likely served by fiber. But I bet every single one of us has one of these, even those of us with long hair. Today's energy market entrants have creativity, they have nimble cultures, they have virtually unlimited access to capital. Think about this. Google, who is an entrant in the utility space, is larger, the market cap of Google is larger than the market cap of every single electric utility in the United States combined. Apple, who's another entrant into the energy space, has enough cash, not market cap, they have enough cash on hand to buy NextEra, Duke, Southern Dominion, and Exelon. They are the 5 largest electric utilities in North America, and Apple has enough cash to buy them. In the same way that we're investing in technologies on the water side of the business that help stave off disruption, we are looking at technologies that could enhance the way we do business on the energy side of the house as well. Participating in technology disruption will be key to JEA's future. Before we look forward, however, let's just take a minute to reflect backward on how we got here. Ryan and I are going to talk about 2 very significant dates for our business during this presentation, and this is the first. It's August 8th of 2005. On August 8th, 2005, President Bush signed into law the Energy Policy Act, and it ushered in a wave of technology advancement and energy efficiency that dramatically impacted our business. This is probably a familiar logo to all of us here. It's a program that was created by the Act and has been a transformative driver of change in our business over the past decade. What that change translates into is the results on this chart. The dark blue line on this chart is the sales forecast from 1979 through the Energy Policy Act, and that reflected the forecast before the Energy Policy Act was passed. In fact, this chart only goes back to 1979, but if you take it back 100 years before that, it looks a lot like this. One thing that was predictable that the electric utility industry could count on is about 3% growth every single year for over 100 years. When the Energy Policy Act was passed, the JEA team took a look at the potential impact on our business at that time, and they recognized there was likely to be some impact on sales. So they reforecasted electric sales, and that's the light blue line that's on this page. They thought that sales would come down, flatten out for maybe a year or 2, and then continue to grow. The red line is what actually happened. Thanks to advancements in energy efficiency, our revenue is now $500 million a year less than we forecasted it would be before the Act. Just want to pause on that number for a minute. $500 million less than it was forecast to be before the Act. It's $250 million in free cash flow. It is an absolutely staggering impact on our business. Our sales are 10% lower than our peak today, and we're 30% lower than they were forecasted to be before the passage of the Act. And that affects all areas of our financial health. Our contributions to the city are $80 million a year less than they would have been based on millage and the unit sales forecast before the Act.
Did you hear that, Councilman Schellenberg?
$80 million less.
$80 million less a year. Per year.
Our business has fundamentally changed. This chart is an illustration of the financial impact that JEA's responses to these changes had on the business. The dark blue line on the chart is non-fuel revenue. The green line represents non-fuel operating expenses. And in the mid-2000s, we had a pretty serious problem. At any time when your non-fuel operating expenses exceed your non-fuel revenue, you literally have no money for anything else. So how did JEA respond to that? Well, we raised rates. You heard in the report, in the quarterly report video, we raised rates by 71% in the electric system. Now, interestingly, you may not have felt that as a retail customer of the electric system because your bills today, on average, are about $20 less than they were 10 years ago. That difference in electric bills is driven by two things. It's driven by a dramatic decline in per customer usage over the last 10 years, coupled with a dramatic decrease in our fuel expenses. So that's the picture today. It's given that our fuel prices are near historic lows today, that's unlikely to be a picture of should we see a repeat in rate increases in the future. We also cut expenses to fund debt retirement. Having a big mortgage when your salary is declining can absolutely cripple you financially, and that's the situation that JEA was in at that time. So we've cut 407 jobs over the past decade. We closed one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the entire United States. We reduced capital expenditures, and all of these actions were taken so that we could enable us to repay debt early. We also, over this period of time, recognized the importance of diversifying our business and rebuilding revenue in complementary revenue streams or in alternative business lines as a way to bolster our revenue stream in the face of sales declines. We attempted to launch an LDC business. We attempted to launch a retail natural gas business. Neither of those efforts, unfortunately, was successful, and so we were really left with only two levers. It was to either to increase rates or reduce expenses. Now, we were able to accelerate our debt repayment. We repaid about $3 billion of debt over the last 10 years, $2 billion of that in the electric system. But the saddest punchline of all for me personally is when you layer on contract debt associated with Plant Vogtle on the right-hand side of this page. We're right back where we started. The story in water and wastewater is a similar one. We raised rates by 72%. That combined with cost cuts like headcount reduction and capital expenditure decreases enabled us to repay $1 billion in water and wastewater, in the water and wastewater system alone. None of these things, though, addressed a foundational challenge. JEA has not participated in the technology disruption that's affecting the energy business in particular. The business diversification strategies I talked about earlier largely failed, and sitting here today, we do, absent future changes in our business, we really do only have the two levers that have been employed in the past to address our future financial challenges, and that's rates and costs. The response over the past decade has been dramatic. We have increased rates in both systems by over 70%. We have 407 fewer jobs today than we had 10 years ago and $3 billion less debt. But what I can tell you today and what Ryan's going to describe in the coming pages is it wasn't enough.
I want to pause there real quick. If you look at the third row down, that's 65,000 accounts. That is the entire city of Tallahassee has been added to the service territory in the last 10 years, and our sales are off 10%. It's about measuring what matters. It's about looking at the metrics and putting them out there so that everyone knows the reality, including all of our employees, because we all drive it day in and day out.
1963, President John F. Kennedy said, "Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future." So it is important that we learn from the past decade and evaluate emerging and future trends as we look at the business going forward. The last decade was marked by energy efficiency and the emergence and maturation of solar and other renewable energy technologies. Since 2014, JEA has seen a 67% annual growth in solar, and it is reducing net income by $2.5 million per year. It is continuing to grow. We are seeing similar trends in battery storage technology that we saw in solar a decade ago. Battery adoption is at the beginning of the curve, but it is demonstrating similar trends to solar adoption. Most importantly, from a business perspective, by the mid-2020s, we expect customers to be able to self-serve with a battery and solar system at a cheaper cost than JEA can provide. Our status quo analysis projects that our sales will continue to decline in the electric system. By 2030, we will increase customers by 16%, and sales will fall by 8%. You can see from the chart on this page
that all sales growth associated with new customers will be offset by continued growth in energy efficiency. Distributed power will continue to grow and further reduce our sales. We do expect electric vehicle adoption to be helpful on the growth side, but we still project to lose around 1 million megawatt hours per year in sales. I know the prior slide only had 4 bars on it, but there's a tremendous amount of diligence that went into these projections. We have details on all this information in an appendix, but we have utilized external data sets, economic forecasts, real customer data, historical trends for the Southeast, and a host of others to guide our projection assumptions. So what do all these sales projections mean? From a financial perspective, we are on strong footing today, largely because we've been able to reduce our debt service. But the reason for the STAR plan was because the green line, the expenses, continue to increase. At the same time, declining sales means declining revenue. The result is a $2.3 billion cash gap on the electric system over the next 10 years. In order to fill that gap, we would need to increase base rates 52%, or a 40% base rate increase with no city contribution after 2023.
Before you move on, Ryan, I want to put this into more of a layman's. When the green line crosses the blue line, that is a bad day. That's like you're not having the money to pay your mortgage. And management has taken great steps. You can see how in 04, 05, 06, we were there. And management has taken great steps over the last decade to dramatically improve the financial health of the business. Sadly, Vogel, as you can see, in 2000, 2001, or 2020, 2021, will be driving that expense line almost right into the blue line if absent rate changes or growth initiatives for JEA. And at that same time, we also are forecasting that we will need a new 500 megawatt generating facility, over a $500 million investment for 40 years, which coincidentally is at the exact same time that we think grid parity, or the time that solar and battery will cost the same for a residential user as it does for JEA to deliver electricity. So we'll be investing over $500 million in an asset that may be obsolete 1 year later. Now that doesn't mean that change happens dramatically overnight, but it does mean that it does draw a conclusion that we need to be starting to thinking about this business in a much different way.
So those rate increases and no city contribution would certainly challenge our 4 measures of value. Aaron just outlined that. But the next decade, the grid parity is really the biggest threat. And on this is the second date, February 6th, 2019, just about 4 months ago. This home on the south side filed an interconnect agreement for a system that would allow them to completely self-serve. They installed 12 kilowatts of solar panels and 3 Tesla Powerwalls. They no longer require service from JEA. On the water side, the story is growth. Customer growth is going to continue to drive sales increases, but just like on the electric side, water efficiency will have an impact on sales. We project to see about an 11% increase in water sales by 2030. The big challenge for the water system will be keeping up with the capital investment necessary to be able to serve the growth. As Melissa discussed with our consumptive use permit, the water system will need to prepare for the 2030s so that we can continue to have enough water for a growing population in Northeast Florida. That capital need creates a $900 million cash gap over the next decade. This equates to a 15% rate increase or a 9% rate increase with no city contribution. So based on the status quo, the next 10 years we'll see customer rates increase 52% on electric and 15% on water. Our operating expenses will grow 87%, and our total debt, including Plant Vogtle, will be nearly $5 billion. So I would ask you, what happens to our customers, and in particular our low-income customers, if we increase their bills by nearly $500 per year? What happens to our business community, economic development, and quality of life in Northeast Florida if we increase rates by 52% and 15%? What will happen if we are unable to provide the kind of financial support that we have historically been able to provide to the city? And what happens if we can't make the investments necessary to protect our natural resources? I started my comments with a quote from JFK about change, and I'll share another. In Kennedy's 1962 State of the Union address, he said, "Every area of trouble gives a ray of hope. And the one unchangeable certainty is that nothing is certain or unchangeable." Until 10 years ago, JFK was wrong. Indeed, if there was ever an unchangeable certainty, it was growth in the electric industry. But the past 10 years have shown that nothing is certain or unchangeable, even for a business that did not change for over a century. The reason that we are having this conversation today about our future is because we believe that nothing is certain or unchangeable, but we must act.
So Melissa and Ryan touched upon a couple other industries. What I'd ask is for those watching and for the board to contemplate, you've seen this story before. You've seen the wireline to mobile transformation. You've seen taxi and Uber. You've seen hotels and Airbnb. You've seen ADT. What is ADT? It's a security company? No, it was the telegraph company back in the day. You've seen Kodak. Little story around Kodak. Steve Sasson was the Kodak engineer that invented digital photography. Kodak invented digital photography in 1975. Sometime in the 1980s, the management team and the board chose to ignore the impacts of digital photography. Sadly, in 2012, Kodak filed bankruptcy. In a more poignant storyline, though, is if you went back farther in Kodak's history. And what you would find is that Kodak was the first company to move, they were the dominant black and white film provider. And they pivoted to color. Yet, even before that, they were the dominant plate photography company, and they pivoted to film. Those were under the leadership of Eastman Kodak, and the management team and board in the 1980s chose not to accept what the future might hold. Now, all that to say is McKinsey and our management team have been, and by the way, hundreds of employees of JEA have been working tirelessly for the last 6 months, trying to develop a status quo baseline because it is a unique piece of work product that most utilities in the nation, and I can validate this, that by rating agency feedback, and past Chairman Howard was there in New York when they acknowledged that perhaps only 2 or 3 utilities in the United States are really thinking about this exact issue, but it's the only thing that matters at this point in time for the electric industry. The most important thing is that you have a management team committed to making sure that the status quo doesn't become a reality. And to that end, I have for you, I think you saw me hand out to the linemen. This is a conversation we've had with all 2,000 of our employees. Are you familiar with what this is? It's a challenge coin. And as a challenge coin, it's got 2 sides. One is water, one is energy. The energy side represents, has the kiss of life, the symbolic picture. And you can pass it down to Mr. Schellenberg. And on the water side is the river. We have been trying to get all 2,000 of our employees to look at this because the status quo bias is a bias that most of us hold, which says that any change from the status quo may in fact be negative. Actually, is almost certain to be negative. That is the bias, is that moving forward, in fact, is oftentimes viewed as more negative than just staying the same. Our hope is that we as a board and as a community and as a management team can start having, through these scenario developments, a productive and meaningful conversation about how do we continue to drive CSEF community, customer, environmental, and financial value going forward, much as we have for the last 125 years. As a reminder, these are the major deliverables that we plan on putting out over the coming months. We are working with McKinsey as an input, as well as the management team and all of our employees. The ideas at JEA inbox is continuing to fill up, and we are continuing to get great ideas from all 2,000 of our employees. And we are moving forward, obviously, on the corporate organization chart, which has changed, the total compensation plan. These are all tools that companies use to drive change. We appreciate the input of the board and look forward to continuing to find ways to improve the lives of all 1.5 million people that we serve.
Thank you. Any comments from the board?
It's a bit overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah.
I appreciate all of the work that's gone into the development of the status quo baseline. It's very sobering, and I suspect that the takeaway from today's meeting will not be the various awards, but the sobering headline from your status quo baseline report. I'm not sure that's as it should be. They deserve equal billing. But I will say that this management team is committed. I've worked with them over the last 6 months as they've begun this process. They've committed to not living with the status quo. It's, I think, incumbent upon us as a board to seek to enable and empower this management team to alter the future and diverge from these status quo line projections that are so sobering. So as I leave the board, I leave you guys with the challenge of empowering this team to do what needs to be done so we don't have 52% and 15% rate increases, and we don't have zero contributions back to the city.
Thank you.
I'm appreciative to the management team for all of the hard work that has gone into this. These facts are sobering indeed, but I would rather go into this eyes wide open because that's our only opportunity that we're going to have to work together to combat these challenges.
Absolutely. I echo the same comments. No need of repeating. Very sobering.
Yeah, I echo my board members' comments, but I think about, we started this meeting with presenting awards to all the to employees in the areas of the organization where we have excelled, and I think this presentation is just an added bonus to show the efforts that the team does every day when they do their job. It's important that we know this information. And I appreciate as well all of the hard work that went into this. But I think we must respond, as Board Member Howard said. I think we need to respond and challenge management to provide strategic plans, options, provide us with options. And to that end, I would say to provide us with options as though you have no constraints. I had the opportunity to meet with the senior leadership and go over the various SWOT analysis for each area, and I've heard the constraints. So I, as a board member, would like to see those options. And it may be necessary for us to actually do a resolution to say that we are committed to finding a solution to what was reported today.
I think Councilman Schellenberg was curious if he could say something.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind,
I have a friend, and still a friend, that was at the epicenter of the cell phone from '79 through until he retired in 2000. And they had actually inquired AT&T in 1979 to ask McKinsey to do an evaluation of just a cell phone. How many people would have it in the year 2000? Does anybody want to guess how off they were?
100%.
Huh?
100%?
Yeah, 100% off.
They weren't even close on 100. 750,000 they thought would use the cell phone by the year 2000. So even smart people, I guess, can get it wrong sometimes, even looking forward. So it's something that I'm glad you're looking at, and I greatly appreciate the thoroughness with your proceeding.
Yeah, I would tell you that that sales forecast that considers there to be only about 1 million megawatt hour loss to distributed generation, that number was probably the most hotly contested number amongst your senior leadership. You have people who think it's too high, and you have people that think it's dramatically too low. I'm not sure that it matters whether you're too high or too low. The fact is that it just exists. Mm-hmm. And because, as Ryan already said, we're already losing almost $3 million in net income a year to that exact, and it's been growing at 67% every single year. The stakes are too high, but I think it comes back to having this conversation is just simply doing exactly what we talked about 1 year ago. Chairman, during the CEO interview, you asked me, how are we going to have trust with the community going forward? And we said, we're going to tell you what we're going to do, we're going to do it, and then we're going to come back and tell you we did it. And the first thing, order of business, is how do we remain relevant to our customer? How do we participate in those technology trends that are going forward? At the end of the day, those two dates, August 8th, 2005, that is the date JEA started competing. Whether we like it or not, that is the date we started competing. Now, we only competed against energy efficiency. I would argue every single person in this room contributed their incremental amount to that $500 million a year of loss that JEA has seen. In February 6th, 2019, well, that's the same as, does anybody in this room have a cell phone that's not a 904 area code? That's where you lived between 2000 and 2005, right? Mm-hmm. That's the date. That's the date that the industry got disrupted by technology. That's the date the telephone company said, you keep your phone number. Free long nationwide calling, because the customers demanded it. At the end of the day, a lot of what we've moved on to in video format, communications, is really a matter of understanding that while we are building from a foundation of operational excellence, absolutely, we are a top tier performer. We have to continue thinking about how do we remain relevant in the customer's mind.
I would say that we have to respond. I think as a board that I think we all agree that we need to take this information and move forward with action. And I'd like to propose or request a motion that we request that management come back, Mr. Zahn and your team, to come back and provide us with some strategic plans and options. Reverend Newbill, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm listening and I'm learning. Madam Chair, did you open that for a motion?
Yes, sir, I did.
Well, if I'm in order, I will make that motion.
I think we already have a first and a second, but thank you so much.
Oh,
we have a first by Board Member Cabil. Okay. Legal says we have to open to public comment since this is added to our agenda. Do we have any comments? Yes, Ms. Franklin. You come on in.
If you come up to the podium.
Okay. Ms. Franklin, before you begin, the comments have to be related specific to the motion that we're going to move forward, have management to seek out a strategic plan and options to the status quo presentation done today.
Does that include the reclaimed water project that was spoke about and the nuclear power plant?
Only specific to the motion that we will move forward with preparing a strategic plan.
If you'd like to talk with me, recognize this is one of the constraints, which is we have to follow certain procedural things as in accordance with Florida law. However, if you'd like, and it doesn't necessarily satisfy that constraint, I'm happy to talk with you offline. Or you're more than welcome to come back at an open public comment at the beginning of the board meeting. Or I'm sure the chair could open up a public comment at the end, I would imagine, for any.
In your discretion. We'll do that. We'll do that.
So does it pertain to the actual resolution at hand?
It kind of pertains to about everything you've spoke about today, but I can
So
talk
then-
to you offline
So,
if you want
so
to
we'll
open it
allow
to-
you to, we'll do public comment at the end to allow you to come back and speak at that time.
Okay.
Just give us a moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. All right, so if we don't have any further questions or comments? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All, any opposed? Okay, that passes. I think this is important.
So you could probably do your public comment.
Huh?
You can do public comment now, or?
We have
Or
committee
We've got
reports.
committee reports.
Okay.
I think that we've, thank everybody's patience for the extended board meeting today, and thank you, Ms. Dykes and Mr. Wanamaker for the presentation.
Thank you.
I almost feel like with the awards that we had at the beginning, you snatched the rug out from under us. As we move forward, we have committee reports. We have Finance and Audit Committee report from Board Member Flanagan. Ms. Flanagan?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As noted in our board materials, we did hold our Finance and Audit Committee meeting last week on May 20th. We reviewed minutes from the prior meeting. We heard budget presentations pertaining to fiscal year 2020 from management. We received the quarterly audit services update, as well as the ethics officer quarterly report and the electric system and water and sewer system reserve fund quarterly report. In addition to that, we received the JEA Energy Market Risk Policy report and announced our next meeting, which will occur on August 19th at 8 a.m. And finally, the committee had special sessions with our Ernst & Young engagement team and our Director of Audit Services.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to add that we also discussed the new Florida statute, which allows for shaded meetings to discuss cybersecurity. And kudos to Mr. Hightower and his team for shepherding that through the legislature in Tallahassee. And are we going to have a shaded meeting about cybersecurity in this board in July, August?
I believe we'll do that as part of the Ernst & Young report out, so yes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, if we don't have any further comments or questions, we'll move on. We need to make a correction on the, we need to amend the resolution at the, I believe it was the March board meeting.
That was me. I tried to promote Camille. It was my fault. I'm sorry, Camille.
You're forgiven.
Okay.
We just need to correct the appointments for the board. We need to make the change, myself as chairman, Reverend Fred Newbill as vice chairman, and board member Camille Lee as secretary, not vice chair. So if I could get a motion to make that correction?
So moved. Mayor culpa.
I'm sorry. My name is spelled incorrect.
We will get that corrected.
Okay. I was supposed to say it when I needed to say it, so.
Alrighty, with the correction of correcting Ms. Johnson's name on the resolution.
No, I'm good.
Let's try that again. Can I get a motion with
Still
the amended
moved.
correction?
So moved.
Still moved.
Second.
And a second. If there are no comments or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is moved. Alrighty. We have any old business?
How's it, Ms.
Anyone wants to discuss?
It's Lee-Johnson.
I just have a quick, is it possible to get the headquarters update each month to
Sure.
find out so that I'm sure the employees would be eager to know how that is progressing?
Absolutely.
Any other old business?
No, but I would like to just confirm that we'll continue our policy as a board of speaking with one voice through the chair. That's sort of an informal policy that the board has previously adopted. I think it's served this board well, and I'd like to confirm that we'll speak through the chair, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Oh, you thank me, but...
Yeah, I don't know what that means. Yeah. Any new business we need to discuss? In open discussion, Sunshine Law does not permit us to chit-chat offline, so any open discussions that anyone would like to have? All right, great. Mr. Zahn, Managing Director's report.
So Mr. Howard touched upon it a little bit. You should also be proud of this management team as we've written and gotten passed 2 bills, 2 new laws for the state of Florida. The first is the one reference which really protects cybersecurity and our cybersecurity data from public records. I will tell you that there's a couple things that keep me, as sobering as the status quo conversation is, there's a couple things that keep me up at night, and that's not it. The safety of our employees is something that we get very real reminders of, and that keeps me up. Cybersecurity and physical security of our system, both on the energy and the water business, those things keep me up at night because it's not a matter of if we're going to get the call, we will get a call. And so having written that bill, House Bill 327, really helps us move forward and talk with this board in a way that allows for us to protect from sunshine. The second is something, JEA took a leadership role at a state level to protect our customers' data and every single public utilities customer data from sunshine. House Bill 591 effectively allows for us to, when we obtain a public records request for a individual or some customer's data, we had to give out the minute-by-minute data. We now only have to provide monthly aggregated data, which allows for us to protect our customers from threat of cyber as well as physical harm. And very proud of Mr. Hightower and Herschel Vineyard and the entire team and working tirelessly in Tallahassee to get those bills completed. And then last, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
So,
Thank you.
And I appreciate this board's support as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Zahn. Just so that we can go ahead, I'll make my report very short. I mentioned earlier that I met with the senior leadership team, and I wanted to say Mr. Zahn has assembled the best and the brightest in the industry. This team is committed to providing exceptional service to our stakeholders, and I'm confident that under Mr. Zahn's leadership, the authority will find the best solutions to the sombering status quo report we heard today. So we challenged the senior leadership team today to go and find the best solutions, but I also challenge all of the employees to continue your efforts and be creative in how we can change this curve. I'd like to thank the board for your continued commitment in absence of a full board. Thank you, Board Member Howard, for continuing to stay on with us. I have heard that help is on the way. And if there are no other comments, I would say that concludes today's meeting. But before we conclude, Ms. Franklin, would you like to come back up for public comment? I apologize for that. Ms. Franklin, not to cut you short, but it's been a long one, so we've got about 3 minutes for your comments.
I'll try to be very quickly.
Thank you.
I heard mention of the reclaimed water that you're looking into. Years ago, the federal government offered JEA a lot of money to go to reclaim water. FP&L took it, so did Clay Electric Cooperative. JEA declined it due to money, saying they needed them high water bills. That's why I went to a well, and you deceived the public then. You said you were worried about lawsuits because of the water. Now you're sitting here today saying because it's more well-treated than the water that comes out of JEA's tap currently. So you tell one story many years ago and you tell another story today. So I'm a little concerned about that. I've known about that for years. You turned down the federal money because you needed to get the money from the local taxpayers. And now you're worried about raising rates. You have to tell the public about your little nuclear power plant deal that has caused a bad deal that we're on the hook for 41% over 20 years. You're going to tell your constituents now bills are going to be raised 20 to 25% because of this? And you didn't have an out in the contract. So I think you need to let the public know about these little things, especially with the easy base going on too from Georgia. So I asked the people here to research all the things going on, but this is run like a government entity and not like a private business like FP&L and Clay Cooperative would have to run their business. So I think you need to start looking at the people that you serve and not being self-serving as a government trying to steamroll us.
Thank you for your comment. And with that, today's meeting is adjourned.